saw there Scott Morrison keen to keep up good relations with the Victorian Labor Premier Daniel Andrews, saying his job is to support Victoria. But there's not the same relationship between the federal government and the New South Wales government. Yet another episode of that today. Here is the Financial Review's front page splash today, with an unnamed federal source posing the question of New South Wales Treasurer Dominic Perrottet and his push for tax reform. What is it he wants to do? Another senior source says, has he got his cabinet on board? This tension between Scott Morrison on one side and Gladys Berejiklian and Dominic Perrottet on the other began in last March's New South Wales election campaign, when Morrison was avoided by Berejiklian during the campaign and not even given a speaking part at Berejiklian's campaign launch. It flared up again, the tensions, during the bushfires, where the Prime Minister was keen to get more involved in the emergency response after his Hawaiian holiday, and Berejiklian and the Rural Fire Service Commissioner Shane Fitzsimmons argued with him over it. And then through the Ruby Princess saga, where both sides were taking potshots at each other, now there is this latest flare-up. Perrottet has made it clear what he wants with a review he undertook into tax reform using some of the personnel from Scott Morrison's COVID Commission, like David Thodey and Jane Holton, is a broadening or increase of the GST to allow the states to to axe brakes on the economy like stamp duty and payroll tax. This latest scrap seems to have come about partly as a result of you asking Josh Frydenberg about this GST question last week, Kieran.
I'm not about to kickstart that debate, and as you would know, Dominic is one state, and there are other states who said they don't support that change. So the states aren't even in agreement about getting more revenue from a tax that they collect everything. We collect it and they get everything from it.
PM said today, in answer to my question, it was up to the states to come up with a consensus around tax reform, and basically appearing to say you could change the GST but not trust the states to axe those state taxes as a result, that it was up to the states to lead on tax reform.
State taxes are a matter for state governments. And so it is important that if states wish to make changes in that area, that they form a common view about what they would like to see happen. Otherwise, you can distract yourself from other important priorities by going down a path that may lead absolutely nowhere. So I think it's important in the first instance for states and territories to be clear about what they want to do and how they would seek to make changes. When they've come to that, and that's what we've tasked through the National Cabinet process, the group of treasurers known as the Council of Federal Financial Relations, it's for them to reconcile that amongst themselves. That's the process. I'm very happy with that process. I've made that very clear to premiers as well. That if there are changes they want to make, if their treasurers want to make, well, they need to get together and they need to sort that out, and they need to present a united position that we could actually move forward on.
Getting the states to all agree without national leadership. Good luck with that. Well, Dominic Perrottet hit back at his press conference today.
In Canberra, they come up with more prime ministers than they come up with policy ideas. And if we were actually fair dinkum about making changes, we'd be working together. I've had very constructive discussions with the Federal Treasurer and will continue to do so. I don't call flying a kite instilling a 12-month review with an eminent panel that's come up with some ideas which should drive our economy both at a state level and national level going forward. I think that's constructive, and that's what the states should be doing. As I've said in the past, we shouldn't just simply be passengers when it comes to tax reform.
Yeah, so some real tension there between Dominic Perrottet and the Feds. What about between the Prime Minister and his own Treasurer? There seems like there's a bit of a difference of approach on that front.
Difference of approach. It's all about these comments from Josh Frydenberg on Reagan and Thatcher. So we saw the Treasurer evoke Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher in terms of the government's approach to the economic recovery from this crisis at the National Press Club Friday.
Thatcher, Reagan, that's an inspiration. Supply side can actually help create and strengthen the economy, and that's what we're determined to do.
Now, the opposition has ceased on this, pointing to the Thatcher destruction of unions and Reagan presiding over homelessness and unemployment. The Treasurer says he's talking about those two leaders' attitudes to supply-side reforms, meaning tax cuts, incentives for business as opposed to their approaches on IR. Well, Scott Morrison not so keen to carry on with that when I asked him to essentially endorse the comments this morning. The Treasurer's comments about a Reagan and Thatcher style approach, do you agree with that? Is that the sort of approach you're after in terms of the recovery?
Well, we're leading an Australian response to this, a uniquely Australian response. And that Australian response requires us to address the supply side issues in our economy. And I've gone through them, and this is why the COVID Commission today is so important.
So, Kieran, the PM insisting there will be a uniquely Australian approach to this crisis, not repeating the names of Reagan and Thatcher there. A bit of a difference in approaches from Scott Morrison and Josh Frydenberg in their rhetoric of the past week over the economic statement. The PM today announcing the continuation of the National COVID Commission as an advisory board to deal with all matters economic, and including former AWU Secretary Paul Howes, now a highly paid consultant with KPMG.